Welcome back to the mic this week. Today I'm discussing a painful silent struggle that touches on so many people's experiences in their marriages. It's about the loneliness that can be when you are with an emotionally unavailable spouse. And this can happen both ways. It can happen with a wife whose husband is emotionally unavailable, and it can happen with a husband whose wife is emotionally unavailable. But for the sake of context, because this is a Christian women podcast, I'm going to talk about wives that are lonely in their marriages because their husbands are emotionally unavailable. And it's going to be a series actually that I'll be talking about. This is so important as there is a high rate of divorce going on in the Christian body as we speak now. And I thought that the book that I am currently reading, which is written by David Clark's Married but Lonely, such an amazing book, is starting with the most important question: why is this happening? And as a couple counselor myself, and it's becoming a rampant experience in my observation that one spouse may have been lonely in the marriage for a long time, and they may discuss it, they may not discuss about it. The lonely spouse, the wife, may not even realize that she's lonely just because she feels, hey, I'm married. So I'm going to talk about what does emotional loneliness look like? What does it really mean? So it's not a physical solitude. It's a profound sense of being unseen, feeling unheard, feeling unvalidated by the one person who promised to cherish you, that is your husband. And this persistent recurrence creates confusion and self-doubt in the heart of the wife. And the core course I have seen as a part-time is prevalent when there is enmeshed families. Now, if one spouse has come from an enmeshed family, simply means where boundaries between family members, often mother-son or father-daughter, is blurred. So they are making emotional separation difficult. The time that spouse or adult should have detached from that parent, it did not happen, or if it happened, it didn't happen successfully. The spouse is already emotionally occupied by a parent or a family dynamic. And sometimes this can involve siblings that are also enmeshed in that family. So the whole family, there is blurred boundaries. Very often, adults from this family dynamic have been parentified from a very young childhood. It means that they have done parenting roles, either because they were raised by single parents, so the other parent was not available. Another thing I have observed as a part-time is that usually these are firstborn children by birth order. So it's either the firstborn daughter or the firstborn son. And so they had taken an adult parenting role, caregiver role at a very young age. And this also has impacted on them to have what you have this overload on their plates. They often had not had the chance to reflect and identify what their own emotional feelings are, what their emotional needs are, because they are busy caring for their siblings or in some cases caring for their parents. And that is not okay at all. And if you're a young lady listening to me and you all feel like you have for a very long time taken the care of your other siblings or your parents, we call it parentification in psychology. And the last podcast, if you're listening to it, Stop Being the Strong Go-To Person in Your Family, it actually talks about over high functioning. And very often, children that have been parentified, when they get to their adulthood, find out that they are now the go-to person in their family. And very often have experienced enmeshment. All their families are enmeshed. So that is the brief background reasons that I have observed that leads to enmeshment. And when this happens, the other spouse feels lonely. Now, as I explained, this is a psychological experience. It does not matter. You may be surrounded with so many people in your marriage and family. You may have many children. Your husband may give you a lot of material things, but you find out that you still don't feel seen. And I'm not even going to talk about how you are being scapegoated in the spouse family, which often makes the whole situation more difficult. So the key takeaway is that you, the lonely spouse, you're married to an emotionally unavailable husband who has learned early on that true emotional intimacy and interdependence is unsafe or is impossible. They never had their voices because their voices were taken from them. Now, the challenge is that some of the spouses that are emotionally unavailable genuinely don't know that they are being avoidant. Right? This might surprise you because you would wonder how come an adult doesn't know that he is not fully present in a marriage. Yeah, it's shocking, but very often because they've learned to be avoidant, they are not even in tune with their own emotions, really. They have also learned to be avoidant in their marriages. So they may not be validating the lonely spouse. They may fail to validate your feelings as a wife. And you might often feel like isolated, confused, and wonder, is this all in my head? Now, I'd like you to also recognize that the lonely spouse might feel diminishing. They may, because your husband does not validate your feelings, and therefore they may diminish it or excuse your experiences that require connection. And I've often seen and I've heard a wife say to me, my husband would just say, oh no, that's all in your head. Surely that's not possible. Therefore, what also happens is that there is a boundary shifting. The intimate avoidant partner puts all the responsibility onto you, the wife, to protect your own peace, to validate yourself, to ensure that you feel seen for yourself. But that is contrary to what marriage should be. Like, you got married so you can feel validated, you can feel valued, you can feel seen and heard to this single person who has promised to cherish you. This is particularly important for women. As you know, a woman's emotions and feelings is such a big part of the way that a woman is wired. And it's so important that a woman is in a safe emotional environment so that she can still feel her femininity. Otherwise, a lot of wives have lost their femininity, they've been emasculated, and because they have not been in an emotionally safe, valued, seen environment psychologically for a long time. So the wife's experience usually will be that that has taken a toll on her, and she will feel triggered, feel confused, and stuck in a loop of trying to explain herself just to be believed, right? The trigger cycle that you are experiencing is actually coming from that emotional avoidance from your husband. And another thing that happens to you as the wife is that your nervous system will be dysregulated. Now, because there is chronic stress associated with not being validated, staying with an emotionally avoidant person, and the stress of having to explain yourself over and over so that you can be believed, dysregulates the nervous system. And as you know, scientifically it's proven a lot of women's health issues are immune. That has come from long-term chronic fatigue and stress. And I want to say this. It's true. If you love a woman and give her a happy environment, chances are that her health will flourish. So another thing to keep in mind as a pattern is that most wives who are married to emotionally avoidant husbands actually have past emotional wounds. They might have been married to a familiar relational dynamic that they were used to growing up. So if their dad or father figure or the male figure as a child was emotionally unavailable, avoidant, they may have married this charming, amazing husband that you have. Handsome, drop dead, handsome, but not emotionally available. And initially, they may not recognize that because at that time, their detector for cues around emotional, signals are not strong. But as they get older, perhaps, have more self-actualization in other areas of life, they're beginning to find out that, although I am doing well professionally, I don't think that I am doing well psychologically or emotionally. So, what that may also start happening is that you start feeling triggered of your sense of abandonment or rejection that you've experienced while growing up. So the past wounds is going to be something like or neglect issues. And this marriage dynamic of being married to an emotionally avoidant husband will trigger those old wounds for you. And it's going to trigger it in such a way that you will feel so dysregulated. You might get aggressive, go into rage, and go into states of regret and guilt because of the way that you reacted, because you felt really triggered by the emotional invalidation, possibly dismissal of your experiences. We can't fix our spouses, all right? You can't fix your husband, but you can regulate yourself. And if this cycle of confusion and invalidation is wearing down your self-worth, it's time that you invest in your own foundation. I am a strong believer that a healthy marriage comprises of two independent, healthy adults. And until both people do their independent, individual work, they might not show up in their marriage as that independent, healthy person. Now, many wives often, over time, lose their identity of understanding that they are an identity, an individual, a human being by themselves without the role of a wife or a mother. And that in itself is another classified enmeshment, all right? Until you recognize that you are an individual, you are an entity on your own, and you deserve to know to have your emotional needs met as much as your physical needs are being met. Until then, you might not feel and give yourself the permission to feel validated, to feel that you're worthy and deserving of emotional validation. All right? So this is exactly why I created my course, the foundational course around Luminous, how to find your life spouse and your husband and how to keep your love. And also the private coaching that I have created as a couple therapist and as a mental health clinician. So I'm going to talk about the next few things that you can do in practical terms that can help you manage this situation before it spirals down into divorce and separation out of the situation. So one of the things I do in my clients, I work specifically on detaching from that cycle, which is actually a codependence cycle, and naming those family of origin triggers. Is it rejection? Is it abandonment, right? Did you feel like you were the scapegoat of the family? And being able to build an identity for yourself that is so strong that your peace is non-negotiable and that you do not wait until you're completely depleted, right? That you find safety and validation. So if this is something you'd like to work on, head over, send me a contact to my email and we can work on that and book a discovery call together. First step, like I said, is to detach. And the concept of detachment is not a punishment to your husband or your spouse. You need that for your survival. That's the truth. And detachment could look like you saying, all right, I might need to move into a different room just so I can have my peace and just so you can also sleep well. This is very important. And so that your nervous system can be regulated. Now, detachment can mean anything to anyone. Basically, it's about boundaries. It's about you creating boundaries to, first of all, go in and reclaim yourself. That is so important, reclaiming yourself. Now, even if you feel like you are at the verge of divorce and you are at the verge of separation, I usually advocate that you heal first, if you can, in the marriage where there is no physical abuse, all right, and where there is no risk of harm to you or the children. Because the divorce is not necessarily the answer, right? It doesn't necessarily bring the solution. Now, I know that this is controversial and some people might come after me for saying that, but that is what I believe. And this detachment I'm talking about has to do with physical and emotional boundaries, all right? Sometimes you are okay to say something like, I'm going through a process emotionally, and I may not be able to connect physically, in terms of intimacy, sexually and all that, until I'm able to regulate myself and get myself back. Another thing you want to do is to decenter. Now, you may have heard this word said around so much on social media, decenter marriage, decenter parenting, as a mother. And it's critical to decenter your spouse and your children, if you have, to reclaim your own needs. Remember, I said earlier that it's so easy for women to get enmeshed when they get married because we play these several roles. And for a long time, we've been lied to that you can multitask. And a lot of us actually think that is a strength. However, science is beginning to show us that you necessarily don't have to because you'll be depleting your emotions. At some point while you're reclaiming yourself, you should actually be able to say, I want to be a human being. I want to be recognized as a self and be treated with value that way. And my life is not altogether summarized just as a wife and as a mother. Now, it depends on the culture where you were raised as you're listening to me. Collective cultures, which I belong to as well, do not understand what I just said now. And so if you're a part of it and where patriarchy is very strong, centering can be very difficult. Firstly, for you, on your individual level, to go like, this sounds so strange to me because I was raised in a culture that almost made me believe that I was made for a man. All right? However, you've got to give yourself permission to see yourself first as an individual. Keep in mind, if you pass on today, the life of your family will go on. Whether it goes on well or not, it doesn't matter, but their lives will go on. And most women need to come to realize that they first need to see themselves as human beings, as an entity, as an individual, worthy of her own needs to be met. So I'd like you to know that this is not something that just happens overnight. First of all, you've got to give yourself permission to let that sink in. All right? And the path to a healthier life of not feeling lonely, feeling validated in yourself, starts first for yourself. That way, when you feel regulated, you feel valued, you feel validated in your emotions, it's then easier for you to even want to reconnect, if you choose to, with your spouse. And I hope you do. So, next week, we're going to talk more about the first two steps in detail, detachment, reflection, and how that can really help you to calm your nervous system. Like I said, this is a part series, but in the meantime, let this sink in that you might have been experiencing loneliness, dissatisfaction, unfulfillment in your marriage, and you may not have been able to articulate and go like, right, I'm lonely in this marriage. And it's okay if you come to that point where you feel dissatisfied. The first level of healing and repairing for you is to accept the reality that you're in and to call it what it is. I am lonely in this marriage. Now, does it mean you should exit? Maybe not. So until next time, I'd like you to stay confident, stay beautiful, keep journaling, and keep your trust in God. All right, take care. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with me today on Emotional Healing for Christian Women. If this episode blessed you, please leave a review and share it with a friend who needs encouragement. And don't forget to download my new book, Beyond the Hurt, from my website, marvelademi.com.au, and other free resources. Until next time, stay healed, stay beautiful, and stay confident.